Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Hank Lee, Marketing Manager at System Soft Technologies. We hope you are looking forward to our expert discussion on why does my organization need intelligent document processing? On behalf of System Soft Technologies and Automation Anywhere, thank you for joining today. As a reminder, you can submit questions at any time by posting them in the comments section. Now, let's introduce today's experts. We have System Soft Technologies Vice President of Intelligent Automation, Thomas Helfrich. We also have a special guest, Micah Smith, Director, Developer Evangelism at Automation Anywhere. We are honored to have Micah and Thomas share their experiences leading a diverse range of client automation projects. Now, let's hand it over to Thomas and Micah.
Well, thank you, Hank. I appreciate the intro, the smooth intro, just like that smooth music. Micah, catching up with you again. How have you been?
I'm great. Thanks for having me again.
Anytime.
You guys had me back, so that's great.
Right.
That's great
It's the third time. So clearly you're an expert.
Yeah.
Jury's still out on me.
Something, or no one else replied.
We'll take that one offline. Today we're going to answer the question of why does my organization need intelligent document processing? And if I think about how our conversations have been about the democratization of intelligent automation, RPA, about keeping the human in the loop, if anything kind of brings this together, I think the technology of intelligent document processing, or the collection of technologies, really kind of embodies all of this. You have an incredible background on this, and I think in our original discussions, when we were originally catching up before all this came together, this is your this is what you used to live and breathe. And so we're going to start with today of answering that question, but there's a million acronyms when it comes to intelligent document processing. I have talked long enough. I'd like you to maybe give us the overview and the basics, if you don't mind. And once again, thanks for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I would start with what is intelligent document processing, and you'll see this acronym of IDP used quite a bit. This is used specifically. I see this in Everest and Forrester. A lot of their documentation has this, but they define that as a software or product that's able to capture data from documents. So that could be from an email, that could be from a PDF or a scanned form, categorizes that, and then extracts relevant data for further processing using intelligent processing techniques. Now, along with that, right, with IDP, there's a lot that goes around with it. And so we hear terms like OCR, OMR, ICR, and even RPA, right? And so I would say that there's a couple of things I want to break down there. First, OCR is optical character recognition. And that's where we're taking an image and we're trying to read data from that image as text. So if I scan a form, right, maybe it's an enrollment form or something like that, that's where I would use OCR to extract data from that form and hopefully do something with that, right? Make that data actionable. OMR is very similar. That stands for optical mark recognition. So if I'm filling out the same kind of form and it's got a checkbox of male or female or yes or no or enrolled or not enrolled, stuff like that, optical mark recognition is used in those cases. And then the last kind of acronym I would use for IDP is ICR, which stands for Intelligent Character Recognition. And this is where we start to think about handwriting detection, right? Some forms I can fill out as a PDF. I might send that in. I might fax it. I might email it. Those can normally be extracted. That's the OCR side of things. ICR is usually intelligent character recognition, where we're trying to interpret handwritten text as machine readable print text, right? And there's a lot of complications that go along with that when we talk about, how terrible my handwriting is versus other people's. But other things like character separation and segmentation, like how do I know when one character ends and one begins? So those are kind of the big phrases that get turned around with IDP. But to kind of introduce this, I would say that IDP is very commonly used in forms processing, and a lot of organizations use form processing for any number of their business processes, which may include things like enrollments, may include things like rollovers, may include things like mortgage applications.
Yeah.
There's still a ton of kind of paper-based transactions in the world.
We're certainly on the forefront of digital, as many people are, many on this live event or listening to this at some point. But there's so much paper that's still out there, and the manual processes and things that still occur. I wanted to point out an interesting piece. Intelligent document processing embodies that OCR, ICR, IMR, those sets of technologies. And I believe, if you think about OCR, it's not new. It's been around for a long time. It's made incredible progress. But what makes an intelligent document processing system work is the combination of the intelligence piece of the actually once you've scanned it through OCR and what you go do with it next. And what makes or breaks a company or a product, I think, often is, how many of these OCR kernels, and the kernel being something that it's actual the technology, the IP that actually looks at the digital document and says this is what it is, versus the combination of maybe AI and other pieces on top of that to say, now I know what to go do with it. And so those make or break a system. Some are better than others. Maybe touch on, and I want to keep this framed around, this technology is not for just huge companies. I mean, because it's now available in cloud and you can pay pennies per page basically for each thing's processed. I think talking about maybe how OCR, the different engines from, Google or Amazon, or there's a handful of other companies of using one versus another. And the idea that a small company can leverage this. I mean, a very small company can use this for a few invoices, or a staffing company or something else can use, or a contingent workforce kind of company can use this for all the processing of timesheets and invoicing. Maybe give a perspective on OCR, its importance on one over the other, and then because you guys have a whole product around this too. Not to be self-serving, but only to say how important is OCR versus the smart part of it, or the combination of it. So maybe give me a perspective and maybe frame that around how big companies versus small companies could use it. I know I said a lot of words there, but I think it's so important to kind of dive into that a little bit so we can get a sense of who can use it.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Thomas alluded to in the beginning of the video, my background is in kind of enterprise content management, and that's where I started. And at the time, that was really document scanning, document processing, that whole 5-step process of like acquisition of forms or scanned paper, right? Or PDFs or things like that, the classification piece, the recognition, the validation of that data, and then the delivery. But it kind of ended there, right? And two things I would say about it. One, it was really those 5 steps, and then it was dump the data someplace, right? It was not what is the next step of this process. It was like, hey, my part's done. Here's your data. I'm out. The other thing I would say about it is it was really only available for large enterprise organizations. And you're talking about $100,000 plus contract just to really get in the door. And that's not really something that's available for organizations that are small or mid-size. Fast forward to today, and now you have a lot of SaaS offerings where you don't have to have the servers on your own location to be able to do some of this stuff. And like you mentioned, you're able to pay per page, and you're able to do, maybe 10,000 a year or something like that as far as your images, and not necessarily having to buy these gigantic contracts where you've got, a ton of money rolled into having to do 5 million plus images per year before you're really going to break even with your ROI. So I think the availability of it. The one other thing that you mentioned is that these OCR technologies have been around for quite some time, and they've been quite good, right? The ability to read text from an image, especially if it's machine print, and convert that to plain text has been something that I could have done starting in like the early 2000s, right? And those engines that were able to do that extraction have, for the most part, been the same, and they've had the same relative level of accuracy. What's really changed in the last 20 years or so is the ability for me to recognize what it is on the form that I'm reading, right? Because the OCR is just the translation of image to text. But for me to understand the context of what that text is and what I'm looking at, how do I find the first name? How do I find the last name? How do I make sense of this data? That's the part that's really kind of turned the corner. And I would say over the last 10 years, especially in the last 5 years, where we started to see a lot of acceleration in that. And so the product you were mentioning, IQBot, is built into the capabilities with Automation Anywhere. And that allows you to do that extraction. You can easily train your own documents. You come in, you choose your type of documents you're looking to do extraction on, and you give some of that detail as far as like the key value pairing of, what is this field that I'm trying to extract? And all of that happens automatically for you. And it's insane that it's so easy to configure compared to how it would have been done 15 years ago, where you've got zonal recognition, and if the page moves or you're not scanning at the same resolution, it's a total crapshoot for you being able to get any kind of data out of that.
So that's incredibly well put. It makes me think of, okay, so how easy is it to implement? Because your you're building a for-purpose system that may have a good framework or start, meaning like, so you're buying a package that has a bunch of already built-in, think of the hyper automation side of this, where it comes out ready and it's already kind of pre-trained to understand what invoices are and what a three-way match is, or it's, already pre-trained to know what a HIPAA 1500 form is, or what a timesheet is for contingent workforce, and then how does that translate into validating the invoice sent from the provider. And there's technologies on top of that, but that's not something that happens overnight. And I think sometimes, I'm always one who's always, I love marketing, and my team will love this too, but I'm a realist when it comes to numbers. And I think if the expectations of a company are that it's going to be 85% automated every time, it's going to be great, and you're not going to need people. I've never really seen that it happen. What I've seen are fractional improvements that are still incredibly well, 20%, 40%, 60%. Some processes that have been very well organized and they're in a BPO and now they're repatriating them back. Yeah, those can get some incredible numbers, 90s, right? They come back because it's just the same thing every time. From your perspective, though, how important is really, though, the process versus the technology itself when it comes to intelligent document processing of those documents?
The process is definitely important. I think the product is actually really important too. So I say the process because I know better than to give a percentage on what someone can expect out of any system, right? With my history of doing intelligent document processing. So I would say that, analyze your process and understand what your input is going to look like so that you have some idea of what you can expect out of the system. And what I mean by that is receiving a fax through a fax server, which is technically a digital image, is not a digital transaction, right? That's someone took something to Staples and then they put it through their like crappy scratched up scanner, and that's what you ended up with. And so that's going to be a 150 DPI image. It's going to be a really low resolution. You're going to have trouble doing anything really with that image. On the flip side, if you're using mostly digital forms and you've got PDFs that have been pre-filled by customers or pre-filled through a web form, those transactions can have extremely high straight-through processing rates. So to that, I would say make sure that when you're starting your IDP journey, you have an idea of where your images are coming from and you have representative images from that set so that as you start to do your training, you can know what to actually expect out of the system. Now, the other side of this is that the product that you pick does matter, right? A lot of these applications, IQBot specifically, have been pre-trained with thousands and thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of invoices, right? So if you're doing invoice processing, this one is already pre-trained out of the box. You're able to get a huge lift on that because it's already seen invoices that are very similar to whatever you're throwing at it. And so that's where product actually does matter because you're getting a huge lift based on the burden of others of self-correcting and manually correcting all these forms. When it comes to extracting other types, again, it's the same kind of thing. I need to be able to teach this application what is the relationship between the data that I care about and the data that's on the form when it's not filled, right? And that's where I have to have an application that supports me to be able to create those custom relationships between data. And what you'll find is that in a lot of those cloud providers, like we talked about with Azure, AWS, they can do some of these forms well, like the invoice extraction. But when it comes to extracting data from your own forms, that's where it starts to get a little bit more dicey because you don't have the ability to customize it on top of what AWS is already offering. And so that's where I would encourage people to look at an application that allows you to customize that to your own field and form types. So I used to work in financial services. We had forms for enrollments. We had forms for rollovers. We were able to customize that to do the extraction that we needed to based on our custom forms. And so I think that's a really important consideration when you choose an IDP vendor or application.
It's a great point. So some of the examples I think are interesting that I've actually seen in a large manufacturer where they had hundreds of thousands of invoices. One of the recommendations that we made was to 100,000 invoices monthly, I should say. So an incredible footprint was to say, with thousands of types. And so it's really hard to change the process upstream to people sending you invoices. But what I saw is that if they got a big lift out of automation if they offered an incentive to say, hey, if you use this invoice type, you'll get a discount on your or you'll get an additional benefit, I should say, of some sort of discount or a bonus or some type of additional payment, because it helped automate them on the back end, which saves them amazing operational costs. And then it also streamlines the process. So leveraging that technology to influence an upstream process with incentive, but therefore creates a better experience for them. At the same time, better savings for you and less errors and all the other things around it. So leveraging it's interesting when you think about an operational thing is just trying to do a little better and faster. But if you align it with a digital transformation type of a play, with an incentive-based play, you can really reform kind of how an industry or how people interact with you at an experience level.
Absolutely. And I'll give a free tip for everyone here, right? One thing that we've done before that worked really well was orchestrated transactions. And what I mean by that is, just like Thomas mentioned, if you do this one type of transaction, we'll give you a discount. If you call in and you say, hey, I need to do a rollover, or hey, I need to do this one type of transaction, what we could do from our end, being the provider of these services, is that we could actually pre-fill a lot of the data onto a form for you, stamp it with a 2D barcode, and then mail that out to you. You go through, fill out the remaining details, you sign it. When we receive it back, we immediately have classification information on that because we know what data was on the form when it left. So we can read that 2D barcode. We can do a lookup on that to find all the data that was on the form when it got sent out. And in that case, we're not relying only on the OCR capability or the ICR capability, but we're able to basically know most of what's on there. And then we know we just need to read the delta or the stuff that you filled out. And so that's a really easy way to, increase your straight through processing rates, just because I know what's on the data. I know what's on the form when I sent it out. And so when I get it back, as long as I can read that 2D barcode, my recognition rates go through the roof.
So let's think about this. So I'm a fill in the blank. I run AP. I'm in a company that has a lot of forms. I'm watching this. But from your perspective, top 3 things that you should consider when selecting technology or implementation partners for this?
Yeah, so the first, and this is like coming from the emotional trauma that I've experienced as a guy running applications at a large like Fortune 100 company, is that focus on the architecture of the application and its install footprint. And what I mean by that is, like, is this a SaaS software, or is this something that I have to run on-prem? And how is it going to work for me when it comes time for doing, our failover testing or our high availability testing, right? I don't want to be in the position of having to worry about how the failover works, setting up the databases, setting up the servers on my own location. I want to choose a SaaS provider. I also want to choose a SaaS provider that scales. So that's going to be my number one thing to be concerned about, because I don't want to be on the hook for, all of the local architecture and doing that within my environment. The second thing I'm going to look at is how much I can customize the product, right? Is that product going to allow me to do my own forms like I talked about? Or am I limited to only being able to do invoices, only being able to do these certain form classifications that it knows about already, versus me being able to do my own custom forms, do my own training, and kind of tell the IDP tool exactly where those relationships exist and how to extract the data, even in forms that may not look exactly like the others do. So that would be number 2. The last one is, I want to make sure that as I'm selecting an IDP provider, that it's not just document scanning, getting data and dumping it, right? And it's really big for me to be able to say, organizations care about the end-to-end process. They don't care about task automation. And if you look at like a rollover process, I know we've used that a lot so far, but the entire process end to end means I start with something coming in, right? That's a form, that's a transaction, that's a fax coming in, and it ends with making a change in my system of record. If I can't automate everything within that process, I need to consider, is this really the right tool for me, right? Because I need to care about what's the slowest and most painful part of that process. How do I automate that? But how do I automate everything else with it? And that's where I'd want to combine IDP plus RPA, so that I can say, hey, I've got the data out of this form. Now, where do I need to take it from here? And whether that means entering that data into one or more systems of record, taking action on a transaction in a workflow application, saving the image someplace, I want to have the flexibility to do all of that. As a fourth bonus tip, because you asked for 3, the last is going to be, how do I have an application that's going to allow me to have that human intervention when I need to, right? We just mentioned that IDP, OCR, all of these different technologies, they're not 100% perfect. I'm not going to get 100% straight through processing on everything that I do. And so how do I have a system where I'm able to have a human in the loop so that when I do have those exceptions, it can be a seamless process and it's not just to drop everything here and it's all manual from here on out? How do I have a human in the process so that they can fix or perfect or correct those exceptions, but then continue processing from there in the same automated channels that I would have otherwise?
I think those are 4 solid. I'll throw another one on there. I think is the ability to orchestrate across with the transparency. So not every company is going to have automation anywhere. Not every company is going to have fill in the blank intelligent document processing company or another RPA provider, but they might and they likely will over time. So having the ability to orchestrate automation, provide transparency, understand the ROI pieces of it, all in kind of one platform would make sense. That aligns to, I think, what Gartner shows, kind of the outlook of you need a platform, you need obviously SaaS, it needs to be some type of integrated. It just can't be all RPA, it can't just be all IDP. It's going to have some AI learning components and built for purpose. So, and I think the platform approach, the SaaS approach, if I'm using maybe the wrong term, is the way to go. And I think that will also then address companies on different parts of their journey. So some companies are, you need to define that as some are just starting where they're looking at, well, we do it manually now. What technology should we select? How could we change our process? To companies who have already automated parts of their processing, and they're looking now to expand it to other parts. And what does that mean? So, you start with a use case, like you said, if you only got a technology that was built for one type of purpose, you now have yet another technology on your stack. So you need something that's not yet another technology. It's an enabling solution of technologies that allow you to apply it, to adapt it and evolve it to what the needs are, and particularly allows you to operate it in real time while you're changing a process. So I think that orchestration layer is needed. I think the platform approach and then all the reasons you stated as well. If I think about top industries, healthcare, financial services, I think state, local governments have so much paperwork, so many standard forms, and so many people doing it. Not going to get in the political debate of what that does potentially to jobs long term or other things like that. But I think if I look at that, I think of even the industries that we've come from, with contingent workforce solutions, where people are involved. All these are so good candidates because of so much back and forth of PDFs is really what happens via email. And I think maybe as we kind of we're getting toward the end of the time, let's predict something. I'll start because I always ask you first. I believe in the next 5 years, new companies will move right to like more of an ETL, which is just a straight digital play. And the ones that have really lagged are really because I think some advances in computing and software are really going to get away from email PDF. I really do. I think it's going to become IDP will become more at the machine level and less at the human process level. So I think you see a huge uplift in this type of technology and its application amongst large organizations, and a huge push in the mid-size. That's going to be like, I'm not going to be doing my invoice processing. I'm just going to drop it into this system and let it do it for me. What are your thoughts?
I hope that you're right. When I got into doing enterprise content management in like 2007, the prediction at the time was like, oh, paper transactions won't be a thing in 10 years. And that's very much not the case, right? There's tons of paper transactions. So my prediction would be that this will be an area that will separate the winners from the losers, right? If you're doing IDP correctly, if you're able to automate those kind of transactions, the more that you can move to digital transactions, the better. But I think that a lot of large organizations that, you kind of mentioned the ETL thing, organizations that are older and have been around for 50, 20, 30 years, they've got these processes that have been largely built on paper and haven't necessarily changed since then. And so I would look to them to really see how they can automate those processes and how they can turn those into truly digital born, digital landed, digital received transactions, as opposed to still relying on those paper transactions. So, I would say that the companies that put an emphasis on how they can move to digital transactions, how they can really implement successful IDP processes, those are the ones that we're going to see survive and move into the next era of success. And those that continue to rely on their traditional ways of, hey, we've always done this way, so why change it? I think those are the ones that are going to struggle. I know that's not necessarily a hot take, but it's something that a lot of people don't think about. They think like, well, we'll just keep doing it this way, it's fine, but we can't just continually have more and more people to do the same volume of work that, you know, could be done otherwise if we have digital transactions.
That's a great point. And, you know, as our time's running out here, every one of the intelligent document processing, even RPA for that matter, implementations, assessments, strategy workshops, COE set, all of it has always started in my end with something we've always done, which is just like a half-day workshop. It doesn't cost anything really. And what it happens is it's a discovery period to give you the art of possible, to give some of the topics and subjects and overviews of the technologies we've discussed in this event, and then the other two as well. So anybody, you know, that's my call to action before I hand it back to you, Hank, is, you know, that's available. If you just reach out, you know, if you see this today or you see it later, reach out and ask questions, because it just starts sometimes with the simple questions. You know, I would feel bad if I didn't say you should probably also look at Automation Anywhere at some point for your technology pick. It should be on your list every time you're looking at this type of technology. The shameless plug time before we end. But Micah, so much time you've put into this for the event, and thank you so much for attending and really giving great perspective for today and all the other ones as well. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. The last call to action I'm going to make real quick is, just like you said, half-day workshop is great. Also, get hands-on with this stuff right away, right? IQBot is available in Community Edition for Automation Anywhere. That's totally for free. You can log in, you can try it out. There are some free sample images that you can try there that are invoices. I think there's some other form types too. But try it out, like see how it works, see how it's able to do that extraction. Load up some of your own forms and see how you're able to train it. It's really easy to get started with. It's fun, and you can quickly see like whether this is going to work for you. There's also some Automation Anywhere University training that's available for free that you can learn how to use IQBot and try this stuff out. So that's my call to action.
Yeah, thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. And Hank, thanks for hosting this. I'm going to cut it back to you.
Hey, thank you, Tom. We want to thank Thomas and Micah for the great insight on intelligent document processing and how these solutions can create better business outcomes. We want you to stay tuned for our next event coming to you live on July 29th. The focus of this episode, led by our security experts, will be the critical steps organizations must take now to ensure they are not the next ransomware headline. Thanks again, and we'll see you on July 29th.